Hey guys, Steve Martin here. I'm here with my buddy Mark Spencer, and today is a super exciting day. We have a lot to talk about. Right, Mark?
Hey Steve, really great to talk to you today. So, as you guys may have heard, Apple just released Final Cut Pro 10.4.9. This update includes really significant workflow enhancements that we've been waiting for a long time.
A long time. In fact, the last major update to Final Cut Pro 10 was in October of last year. And there weren't so many workflow enhancements. It was more about metal compatibility, GPU rendering. There were a few color board enhancements, but no real workflow enhancements. So in this update, we think you editors are going to be really happy with what Apple's put into it.
Exactly. And in this video, we're going to walk you through all of them. We're going to show you the new proxy workflows, both in Final Cut Pro 10 and in Compressor, the new Smart Conform feature for delivering to multiple sharing platforms, and a variety of other editorial and workflow enhancements that we think you're really going to like.
Right, and what we've done is take all these features and put them into one movie. So you could watch the whole thing, or you can click the chapter index that we've included, and you can jump to the feature that you're interested in watching and reviewing. And by the way, we've separated the motion tutorial into another movie, and the link for that is below.
So we're super excited to show you the features. We won't talk anymore, we'll get into it, but we're really interested in your feedback. So please leave a comment below, and let's just jump right into the new features.
As content creators, we often need to output movies for multiple platforms. For example, you might want a UHD version for YouTube, a vertical video for TikTok, and a square video for Instagram. With Final Cut Pro's new Smart Conform feature, you'll be able to output the sizes you need quickly and efficiently. In this project, I have a few UHD clips placed into a UHD project with an animated lower third. Before you output a vertical and/or square version of your movie, you'll first want to check the placement of any titles or graphics to see if they need to be repositioned. From the View menu, choose Show in Viewer, Show Custom Overlay. A semi-transparent graphic is superimposed in the viewer that defines the aspect ratio of the movie you plan on exporting. In order to apply a custom overlay, you must first create it in an external image editing app like Photoshop or Pixelmator, then import it for use in Final Cut Pro. Before we get to that, I'm going to delete this overlay so you can see where Final Cut Pro stores them. This time I'll use the View menu in the upper right corner of the viewer and select Choose Custom Overlay, Reveal in Finder, and I'm taken to a dedicated folder within my user library. I'll delete this overlay, and back in Final Cut Pro, I get a message that tells me the overlay is missing. Perfect! Now I can show you the process of adding them. Here in Photoshop, I've created two overlay layers, one with a 9:16 aspect ratio and one with a 1:1 aspect ratio. I exported each layer out as a PNG file to include the transparency information. In Final Cut Pro, I'll go to the View menu and select Choose Custom Overlay, Add Custom Overlay, then navigate to my exported files. I'll select the vertical overlay and click Open. Instantly, the graphic is superimposed over the image in the viewer. The opacity of the graphic can be changed by going back to the View menu and selecting an option from the Show Custom Overlay menu. By the way, you can access multiple custom overlays from this menu. I'll navigate to the square aspect ratio overlay I created and add that one. Now I can choose whatever overlay suits the needs of my output requirements. I've included a link in the description to both of these overlays, so you don't need to create them yourself. With the vertical overlay enabled, I can position my title. I'll duplicate this lower third by option dragging upward, then disable the bottom clip. Using the overlay, I'll move the title so that it appears centered at the bottom of the frame. To disable the overlay, choose Show Custom Overlay. Now I'm ready to create my vertical deliverable. I'll right-click on the project icon to reveal the new Duplicate Project As option. Choosing this will bring up the project settings window, allowing you to predefine the output format for your duplicated project. From the Format menu, I'll choose Vertical. Also note that I can choose a square format as well. From the Resolution pop-up, I'll choose 2160 by 3840. Now here's the magic button. There's a new checkbox labeled Smart Conform that, when enabled, will set in motion an analysis of every clip in your project to determine where the subject should be placed relative to your output dimensions. I'll add the word vertical to the name of the project, then click OK. Depending on how many clips are in the project, it will take a few moments for the analysis to complete. Locate the duplicate project and open it. The first thing to notice is that the lower third is now perfectly positioned at the bottom of the vertical frame. Now let's see what Smart Conform did. I'll enable transforms and zoom out so we can see the frame boundaries. Selecting the clip reveals that the clip's anchor point was moved along the x-axis to keep the subject in the frame. Selecting a few other clips reveals how each one was intelligently repositioned within the vertical dimensions in order to keep the subject centered. If your subject moves through the frame, however, you'll need to keyframe the anchor point, which is easy enough. While I can see the boundaries of the frame, it would be so helpful if I could see the entire image. Oh wait, I can. By clicking this new Transform Overscan button, I can now see every pixel relative to the viewer dimensions, making it easier to adjust my final framing and even keyframe the position. I'll move the playhead to the beginning of the clip, then set a keyframe for the anchor point. I'll move the playhead to the end of the clip, then drag in the X value until the subject is center frame. A second keyframe is set for the anchor point, and when played back, the frame animates with the subject. That looks pretty good, but it's a little slow. I'll press Ctrl V to open the animation controls, then move the second keyframe earlier and play that back. That looks better. There's also one more thing I need to show you relative to Smart Conform. I'm going to add another 4K clip of Denise and her dog. Because this clip was not included when I created the Smart Conform project, I can easily just conform this single clip, or multiple clips that have been added since then, by choosing Smart Conform from the Modify menu. And just like that, my new clip is intelligently centered within the target frame size. One of the most exciting new features of Final Cut Pro 10.4.9 is the new ProRes RAW camera settings that allow you to make image adjustments to all the available data captured by the camera's sensor. Before I show you the new tool, I need to point out that any adjustments you make and the resulting image in the viewer is dependent on how your library is set up for color processing. With the library selected, click the Modify button in the inspector. My library is currently set for Standard, which processes color in the ubiquitous Rec. 709 color space. Unless you're delivering content for high dynamic range and you have the necessary hardware for evaluating your images in this wider gamut color space, you'll want to use Standard. I'll start by selecting this keyword collection in which I've placed 3 5.7K clips that were recorded with the Atomos Shogun connected to a Panasonic EVA1 camera. Selecting the clip and inspecting it reveals that the codec is ProRes RAW. To access the camera settings, I'll choose Settings from the Metadata View pop-up menu. I'll also reveal the video scopes so we can objectively evaluate the changes I'm about to make. The first thing to notice is that the highlights are completely blown out. The standard gamut setting is incapable of presenting the full gamut or dynamic range available for this clip. Prior to this version of Final Cut, one common way to deal with this issue is to choose a RAW to log conversion setting from this pop-up. By choosing Panasonic Vlog, for example, I'm manually doing what most cameras do internally in order to preserve the full dynamic range captured by the sensor. And now the image appears flat in the viewer. At this point, we could color grade using Final Cut Pro's color tools to expand the dynamic range, or we could apply a camera LUT, which does this automatically using math. Now that we have new controls for the RAW camera settings, there's an alternate way to approach normalizing your images. I'll set these menus back to none, then add this clip to the project. Final Cut Pro brings up a window that tells me that I'm about to add a high dynamic range clip to a standard dynamic range project, and that the brightest content in the image will be clipped. Well, given what I've told you so far, that makes perfect sense, so I'll dismiss this window. In the inspector, we have control over the ISO, exposure offset, and camera color temperature. Each of these settings are based on recorded metadata in the file itself and can be changed at any point during editing, all non-destructively. Using the ISO pop-up, I'll set it for 160. Immediately, we can see image detail in the sky. The exposure offset slider moves the exposure or brightness up or down from the baseline ISO setting. And I can adjust the color temperature using this slider, or I can enter a specific value. And you know what else is really cool? No metadata sidecar file is created, since all the metadata is encoded into the movie itself by the recording device. At this point, I have a near-perfect starting point for grading my image. I'll open up the color tools, crush the shadows a bit, and boost the saturation in the midtones. And with just a few clicks, I'm done grading. All of these raw camera settings can be applied before adding the clips to your project. Here are two other clips recorded from the same camera under similar lighting conditions. I'll select them both. Then in the inspector, choose an ISO setting. If you want to force the clip into a Rec. 709 color space, choose this option from the Color Space Override menu. When you add the clips to the project, you won't get that color space conversion warning we saw earlier. And because these clips are ProRes RAW, the playback performance on these 5.7K clips is stellar, with no rendering necessary. I can't stress how important this is. If you work with other RAW codecs from other camera manufacturers, you'll often need to render in order to achieve real-time playback performance. For a complete list of all the cameras that offer ProRes RAW metadata support, please visit Apple's website.
Proxy workflow has been significantly enhanced in Final Cut Pro 10.4.9. First, you now have a choice of codecs and frame sizes. With my empty event selected, I'll click here to import media. In the Media Import window, I'll navigate to a folder of ProRes encoded clips that I want to import. Let's say that this media is on a RAID, and I want to create proxy media versions of these clips so I can fit them on my laptop computer and edit while traveling. Or I may want to upload a lightweight proxy-only library for another editor to work on. In the transcode section, in addition to the options to create optimized and proxy media, which we've had before, we now have new options for proxy media. I'll select it. In addition to the default ProRes proxy codec, with a frame size matching the source, we can now choose H.264 for the codec. In addition to the codec options, we can now select from 4 different frame sizes for either codec. The H.264 option is a great addition because it creates much smaller files. For example, I tested a 6-minute UHD ProRes 422 clip that was 5.3 gigabytes. The ProRes proxy file at 50% or HD was 1.8 gigabytes, or about 34% of the original size. The H.264 proxy file at 50% was 219 megabytes, or about 4% of the original size. Note that the H.264 option is only available for SDR material. HDR proxies will be created in ProRes Proxy. If you're encoding to H.264 to save space, I'd recommend not going below 50% unless you really need to. You'll see a significant loss of visual quality and the file size reduction doesn't continue to be as dramatic. For example, the same file encoded to H.264 proxy at 12.5% is 169 megabytes, only about 23% smaller for a quarter of the resolution of the HD version. For our example here, this folder of ProRes 422 clips is about 100 gigabytes. I'll choose H.264 proxy at 50% and import these clips. Note that I have Leave in Place selected so that the original files will remain on the RAID and the proxies will be stored in the location I set for my library, which in this case is the default setting of the library itself. If we open the background task window, we can see the progress of the transcoding. Once transcoded with the library selected, in the Library Inspector, we can see the total size of the proxy media here at the bottom is 4.3 gigabytes, about 4% of the original. By the way, the Up To option will cap the size of your proxies at the chosen resolution, no matter the size of the original files. For example, if you have a folder full of HD, 4K, and 8K clips, and you choose up to 1920 by 1080, your HD files would stay at their native size, while the 4K and 8K files would be downscaled to 1920 by 1080. Of course, you can also transcode clips that are already in your browser or your timeline. Let's say this clip is a very long interview clip, and even at this HD frame size and encoded to H.264, it's too large. Or perhaps it's an angle in a multicam clip that won't play back in real time. First, I'll select it, and in the info inspector at the bottom, I can confirm it has a proxy representation. Then I'll choose File, Delete Generated Clip Files. Yes, you can now delete generated media for individual clips. Note that I could do this for multiple selected clips, a project, an event, or even an entire library. And I'll select Delete Proxy Media and click OK. Now in the inspector, the icon next to proxy has changed to a red triangle, indicating there is no proxy representation. Now, let's create a new proxy. File, Transcode Media, and I'll select Proxy H.264 at 25%. If it were to be part of a multicam clip and I had the space, I'd probably choose the ProRes proxy codec, since although it's larger, it's easier for my system to play back. Once the transcode is complete, we get the green dot in the inspector, and now we have a customized proxy encoding for this clip. So, not only can you select from multiple encoding and resolutions when transcoding media, you can encode different clips in the same library with different settings based on your needs. Okay, I love this new workflow. You can now easily create a proxy-only library. Here I have a library containing an edit in progress. At the top of the viewer, if I click the View menu, we can see we're viewing optimized or original media. I'll select Proxy Only so that we can see that we also have proxies in this library. I'll switch that back to Optimized Original. Notice at the top of the library inspector that my library is on my RAID. My media is being stored in the library, although it can be external as well, or both. And at the bottom, we can see that the total size of the media is a little over 38 gigabytes, and the proxy media is about 6 gigabytes. Let's say I want to make a smaller proxy-only copy of this library to take on the road to edit, or to send to another editor. With the event selected, I'll choose File, Copy Event to Library, New Library. I'll name this library Travel, place it on my desktop, and click Save. Now, I get a new dialog box where I can choose whether or not to include the media. I'll choose to include it, but I'll only include proxy media in this travel library. Notice that any media that doesn't support transcoding will be copied to the same destination. Let me make an important side note here. This media that does not support transcoding to proxy, like stills, audio, and media with transparency information, will not get copied if you use the consolidate command to consolidate proxies to a new location. It's only included when you use the copy command to copy a clip, project, event, or library to a new or existing library and choose to include proxy media. For the destination, I'll choose to store that proxy media inside this travel library. If any of the media I want to copy isn't inside the current library, I can select here to have it copied as well. I'll click OK. My new travel library appears in the libraries list. I'll close my original main library so that it's clear I'm only working on the travel library. I'll also rename the event in the travel library to Proxy to indicate the media it contains. Let's assume I've now disconnected from my RAID and I'm on the road with my laptop, or that I've sent this library to another editor. I'll open my rough cut, and it appears to be offline. That's because there is no original media associated with this library. Notice that the stills in this project are not offline because they don't support transcoding to proxy, so they were copied to the library. The same would happen with any audio in this project, as well as clips with transparency. From the View pop-up menu, I'll select Proxy Only, and now all my media is online. I'll make a few obvious edits, and I'll append FineCut to the project name. Now, let's assume I'm back in my office and I want to get this FineCut project back into the original library. I'll open that library. I'll make a new event in that library and call it FineCut. You don't have to create a new event. I'm just doing this to keep things tidy. Now I'll go back to the travel library and drag my FineCut project to the new event in the main library. I get this same copy dialog that we saw earlier for an event, but this time for a project, where I can choose to include the media. I know I don't need it here, and I'll click OK. Then I'll close the travel library since I don't need it anymore. Now I'll open the copied Final Cut project, and if we're set to view proxy only, we can see it has reconnected to the local proxy files. And if I select Optimize/Original, all the clips in the project automatically switch to point to the location of those original clips. So with this new workflow, we were able to create a lightweight proxy-only library that included stills and audio that don't support transcoding to proxy, edit in that library in another location with no access to the original media, and then bring that edit back to our original library and connect it to the original media without ever using a relink command or going to the Finder to move or copy files. Here I have a proxy-only library that I created using the same workflow I described earlier, namely by copying the event to a new library and choosing proxy media only. I'll cancel that. The timeline includes an H.264 drone video clip, a ProRes 4444 clip with transparency, a graphic with transparency, and an audio clip. In the View pop-up menu, I'm currently set to view proxy only. If I switch to Optimized/Original, my video clip appears offline, but my ProRes 4444 graphics and audio clips remain online. That's because these media types don't support transcoding to proxy, so Final Cut now automatically copies them when you select proxy media in that copy operation. But what about this new Proxy Preferred setting? Proxy Preferred will show me proxy representations if they exist, greatly improving performance, but still allows me to use optimized or original clips if there's no proxy available. To see one case of how this setting can be useful, let's return to proxy only. Then I'll import a new clip. I'm not going to create a proxy of this clip on import because I have this clip locally and I don't want to create more media. I'll also choose Leave in Place. Notice how it appears offline. But if I switch to Proxy Preferred, I can now see that clip and work with it. So I can continue to add new media to a project and continue to work with existing proxies without being forced to create proxies for the new media I import. There is much more to proxy workflows and how they integrate into overall media management in Final Cut Pro X. For a deeper dive, check out our fully updated media management tutorial available at rippletraining.com.
Now that you have a good understanding of Final Cut Pro's flexible new proxy workflow, thanks to Mark, in this section I want to show you how to create proxy media using Compressor and why you might want to do this as opposed to having Final Cut Pro generate the proxies for you. Here I have an event that contains a number of log-encoded clips that I shot using Blackmagic Design's Pocket Cinema camera. I have a client who wants to do a rough cut edit at home with proxy media, but she prefers to edit with clips that don't look flat. In other words, she wants all the media with a LUT burned into them. Now I can certainly apply a LUT by selecting the clips in the event, then use the inspector to assign an appropriate camera LUT. However, if I transcode the clips into proxy media, in this example I'll choose a 960 by 540 frame size, then choose Reveal Proxy Media in Finder, you can see that proxy media was indeed created, but the LUT was not applied to the transcoded media. So here's where Compressor comes in, because it allows you to batch render out proxy media with a burned-in LUT, then afterward relink to that media in Final Cut Pro. I'll start by selecting the clips I want to create proxy media for, then make sure that no LUT is assigned in the inspector. From the File menu, choose Send to Compressor. The movies are sent to Compressor and appear in the batch window. Next, I'll locate the Proxy Preset group in the Settings pane. This group contains various proxy resolutions in both ProRes and H.264. Mark did a great job of covering the differences between these settings in the previous section. Since my client's hard drive space is limited, I'll use the half-size H.264 preset. Before applying the preset to the movies, I'll first need to duplicate it and assign a camera LUT to it. In this case, the Blackmagic Design Film 4K LUT. I'll change the preset name to include with LUT so that in the future I'll know what this preset does. In the batch window, I'll click on a job and press Command A to select the rest, then drop my custom preset into the batch window. Selecting the preset for any job will present a split screen in the viewer, with the LUT applied on the right and the unaffected clip on the left. Drag the center divider to see more or less how the movie will look after it's rendered out. Next, I need to assign a custom location. A location is simply a designated folder on your system that Compressor will render your movies into. For proxy media, it's always a good idea to create a custom location. To do that, I'll click Location, and then the plus button in the lower left. Choose where I want to store my proxy media, create a new folder, give it a meaningful name, then click Choose. With all the jobs selected, drop the custom location into the batch window. The folder you assigned will appear under the word Location for each job in the batch window. What is especially important about using custom locations is that they automatically remove the name of the preset from the end of the clip name, so that each of your proxy file names will match your camera original names, which will make the relinking process in Final Cut Pro a seamless operation. Now click Start Batch. Back in Final Cut Pro, select the clips you sent to Compressor, then go to the File menu and choose Relink Files, Proxy Media. The relink window will appear. Choose All, then click Locate All. Navigate to the custom location you assigned in Compressor, then click Choose, then Relink Files. At first, it appears as if nothing was relinked. This is because Final Cut Pro is currently set for viewing original media. I'll choose Proxy Only from the View menu, and the clip thumbnails update in the browser. Final Cut Pro is now referencing the media in the location I established in Compressor. If I right-click on the clip and choose Reveal Proxy Media in Finder, I'm taken to the external location where I can see the LUT is burned into the half-size proxy files. To prepare the media for handoff to my client, I'll want to select all the clips in the browser and copy them into a new library. I'll name this library Client Edit. In the window that appears, I'll select Proxy Media and click OK. By selecting Proxy, Final Cut Pro will not look for any original or transcoded media when the library is opened on my client's end. So that my client has everything she needs to edit, I'll upload both the library I created and the Proxy Media folder to Frame.io or other file sharing service. On her end, she'll open the library and relink to the Proxy Media, just as I did earlier in this tutorial. In a future video, I'll cover the specifics of how the client should set up the project on her end before sending it back to me for finishing. In this section, I'm going to walk you through some of the small, but nonetheless significant improvements to editorial workflow in Final Cut Pro 10.4.9. Let's start with audio. For nearly 10 years, editors have been asking for audio crossfades, so it's better late than never. To create the crossfade, select two adjacent clips in the primary storyline, then from the Modify menu choose Adjust Audio Fades, Crossfade. To see your crossfade, press Ctrl+S to expand the audio. The crossfade is created by creating an overlap in the audio that matches the fade duration you have set in your editing preferences. In this case, I have the audio fade set for 1 second, so I have a 1 second crossfade. You can also apply crossfades to connected audio clips, so long as they exist within a group, called a connected storyline. I'll hold down the G key and bump this music with the previous clip to create the group. I'll select both audio clips, which are now adjacent to one another, then press Option T to create the crossfade. Expanding the audio, you can see the crossfade applied. The next series of small enhancements has to do with managing your projects. The first one we'll look at is the new Duplicate Project As command. By right-clicking on the project thumbnail and choosing this option, a project settings window appears, allowing you to create a new project based on a different format than the project you are duplicating. So for example, I can set the format to any of the resolutions that appear in this menu. I'll set it for 1080p and explain why this is important in a moment. You should also be aware that the frame rate cannot be changed, as the time base is always based on the original project you duplicated from. In the project name field, I'll add 1080p, so I can quickly identify the format for this project in the browser. Then click OK. I'll double-click the project to open it. So why would you want to do this? Well, for one, because the project is referencing UHD original media, I can park my playhead over any clip, set the spatial conform to none, press Shift-T to enable transforms, then use all that additional resolution to reframe any shot in my project. Another reason is for exporting different master file resolutions. For example, if I select the UHD version of this project and share a master file, I can only export a UHD master file. There's no option in this window to create a 1080p version. However, if I select both the UHD and the 1080 versions, I can share both of them as a master file. The Share window lets me know that I'm about to export two projects. I'll click Next, create a target folder to save them into, then click Share. Once exported, I have two movies in the high-quality ProRes format in two different resolutions. The next enhancement, like audio crossfades, has been a long time coming. If you right-click on the backward or forward history buttons, you'll see a menu with a list of all the projects you have currently open, making it easy to quickly access a project without having to go back to the browser to locate it. But this feature is not new, though I'll acknowledge that some of you may not have known it was there in the first place. What is new, however, is the ability to close projects. Clicking the button to the right of the project name brings up a menu where you can close the project that is currently open, or close all the other projects but the one that is currently open. The menu does say Timelines, but since timelines are synonymous with projects in Final Cut Pro, it's the same thing. I'll close all the other timelines, and when I go back to check the history menu, they're all cleared out. The final project-related enhancement has to do with browser sorting. By placing the browser in list mode, then right-clicking any column header, you'll see a new menu item, Last Modified. Selecting this option will show you the last modified dates of any clips in your library or events, depending on what you have selected in your library sidebar. Like any browser column, this can be rearranged and sorted by ascending or descending order. In this section, we're going to take a look at some of the new 360 video enhancements in Final Cut Pro 10.4.9, particularly the stabilization and the new stereoscopic viewing options. Before working with 360 footage in Final Cut Pro, you first need to decide how you plan on delivering your material. Final Cut Pro 10 gives you two ways of working with footage that was shot with a 360 camera. You can either place the 360 clip into a 360 project for viewing in a VR headset, or you can place it into a standard HD project so that you can animate the orientation of the sphere to direct your viewer's attention. Here's a clip in the browser that was shot with the popular Insta360 One X camera and exported as an equirectangular clip using their desktop app. I'll place the clip into a project by right-clicking and choosing New Project. I'll set the video format to 1080p HD and the frame rate to 30. I'll name the project and press Return. With the playhead over the clip, I'll enable the orientation controls in the lower left of the viewer and press Command 4 to reveal the inspector. Using the Field of View slider, I'll widen it to about 132 degrees. As I play the clip back, notice a horizon line roll from one side to the other. Before I apply the 360 stabilization effect, I should point out that you may or may not see stabilization, depending on the stitching software you used. When I rendered this clip out of Insta360 Studio, I turned it off just so I could compare the stabilization from the app versus the stabilization applied in Final Cut Pro. In the inspector, locate the stabilization section and enable it. That's it. That's all you need to do. And of course, wait for the analysis file to be generated. Before playing back, I'll enable the horizon guides in the View menu, then use the on-screen orientation controls to adjust the framing. Judging from the guides, the clip looks rock solid. Now we'll use the controls and swing the sphere around to the other side and adjust the framing to place the horizon in the center. Looks great. But how does this compare to the stabilization that comes from the Insta360 Studio app? Well, here they are side by side, and you be the judge. Turning our attention to 360 editing for playback in VR headsets, there's some new project preset options. I'll right-click on this Stereo 360 clip and choose New Project. In the resolution pop-up, there is now a 5.7K and an 8K preset. I'll choose the 5.7K preset, name the project, and press Return. This project happens to be stereoscopic, as indicated by the over-under image in the viewer. I'll enable the 360 viewer and drag around the sphere to inspect the video. In previous versions of Final Cut Pro, you could only view the left eye of the stereo image in the 360 viewer, which made it impossible to objectively judge parallax, the visual phenomenon where objects at varying distances from the camera appear at slightly different horizontal positions from the left or right eye perspectives. You can see this effect in action by holding a finger up in front of your face and alternately closing each eye. See how your finger changes its horizontal position for each eye? That's parallax, but you could also call it horizontal disparity. It's simply a result of slightly different perspectives from your eyes, and it's one of the cues your brain uses to determine depth, either in the real world or while wearing a VR headset or 3D glasses. Using the Settings menu, you can now select from a number of new stereo viewing modes. For example, you can now view an anaglyph composite of your Stereo 360 clip. The traditional anaglyph is one where the left and right eyes are presented in chromatically opposite colors, in this case red and cyan. If you look at the edge of the metal sculpture and the trees in the background, you can see the anaglyph separation. Viewing the image with 3D glasses, the colored lenses act as filters that separate the left and right images and create the illusion of depth. When viewed without glasses, this setting, along with the other settings in the list, are just different ways to help you objectively determine the disparity between each eye. If you need to make adjustments, use the convergence slider, which has been greatly enhanced to adjust for the stereoscopic distance of objects from the viewer. So what do you think? What are your favorite new features? We'd love to hear your comments. Post them below.
Absolutely, and stay tuned because we're going to be doing a Ripple Live episode where we're going to share more of our thoughts about these features and answer your questions. So subscribe below to get notified about that and all the new content we produce.
So we really want to thank you for watching. We'll see you again soon.